We'll just. So yes, so tonight's uh, presentation, I guess I'll call it, is going to be recorded. So just so you'll know that. Again, it will be that I'll be sharing my screen for most of it. So chances are slim that you'll be on it, but just so that you know that. We'll just give probably a couple more minutes until 5 after, and then we will jump into the evening. Yeah, I am also Zooming to you from my home in Haley, Idaho. And like Beth and I were talking, it's like dog feeding hour and I've got my critters in here. So I'm sure at some point they will be making a happy appearance and sounds. Children, it's also the witching hour for children, I know. So I'm sure we'll get some, we'll get some good maybe animal children views. As always, because, you know, just to be really vulnerable and put that out there, that doing a presentation, it's so much nicer to do it to people's faces, right? It's so nice to know that there's a community of people out there. But again, it's your choice. It's that dinner time hour. So if you're making dinner in your kitchen and you don't want to have your camera on, great, don't do it, right? If you can join, I really would invite you to just take this next hour and 10 minutes now to just try something out, be present here with this community. And again, no pressure, but just wanted to put that out there. We are just putting our names and where we're calling in from in the chat if you're just joining. Just a reminder that we are recording. So you can do with that with your video as well as what you'd like or your name. Know that there's all those options. Beth. So I just want to say Beth Markley is here. She is the executive director of NAMI Idaho and has coordinated this evening for us. Thank you, Beth. So I'm just going to turn it over to Beth for a moment and then we'll get going. Just let me know when you want me to begin sharing the screen, Beth.
You can go ahead and do that.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that, you know, it might be that most of you know who NAMI is, who we are. I see some of our facilitators on here, our board members. So just briefly, though, I wanted to share a little bit about NAMI. This is actually a presentation that we are sharing with you just because we think it's so groundbreaking. And we are actually going to be sharing with you a little bit more about, here, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody so that I can. Yeah, so anyway, we're going to be producing a series of these across the state. We did receive some funding from the Idaho Resilience Project, so that will allow us to do some more in-depth trainings. It really is it would be our desire to have everybody trained in CREM, what we call CREM, Community Resiliency Model. A little bit about NAMI Idaho and what we do, if you want to advance the slides a little bit. We are the state organization of NAMI National, and our mission is to support education and awareness, destigmify mental illness, advocate, and provide support. And we work with our affiliate chapters throughout the state to do that. And you can find most of what we offer on our website at namiidaho.org. Next slide. We've had a lot of growth in the last year, primarily because while we lost all of our funding from the state back in 2008 and became a volunteer organization primarily, and things languished a little bit. And in early 2021, we received a very large grant from the Cambia Health Foundation that allowed us to start hiring staff and coordinate some of these efforts on behalf of NAMI Idaho and support of our affiliates statewide. So in 2021, we've had a ton of growth, including just an explosion of our support groups, statewide. And then in 2022, our plan is to really expand on our educational programming and support groups, because we just think that, especially within the time of COVID, we've got the opportunity to work with folks through Zoom and online, and really reach out to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to access some of these services. So it's really a great opportunity for all of us, and so we'll share some more with you about that later. Next slide. Yeah, so 2022, we have groups of different offerings. One that has grown explosively this year is our peer-to-peer programs, our peer support programs. And what our folks in other parts of the state have told us is they need to see that kind of growth in our family support programs. So that's what we're going to be really focusing on 2022, as well as our youth and peer youth support programs in the universities, hopefully at the high school level, and site-based youth support programs. We want to make sure that our programs from support group to educational programming, everything is at a level where we can confidently say this is going to be a benefit statewide. So we've been really focusing on that. And we've gone from, a handful of online support groups and in-person support groups statewide to now we have virtually something every night of the week, if not 3 or 4 different support group opportunities. So I do hope, if you want to go to the next slide, if you are in need of educational opportunities or support groups, that you'll check out our calendar at NAMIIdaho.org, and you'll as well see information at that website about some of our educational offerings coming up this year. So I think we did just receive another big influx of support from the Department of Health and Welfare for helping, reach out to folks in this time of COVID when the need is especially strong. And so you're going to see, I think, some more growth in the opportunity that we have to support folks statewide coming up. So I'm really excited about that. Laurie, back to you.
Thank you. I'm so thankful for NAMI and this burst of virtual support that you're providing. So thank you. And for just really believing in this model and helping it spread across the state. So I will talk more about that and those continuing opportunities. But to jump into tonight, like the first slide showed, I'm Laurie Strand. I have been involved with system-based mental health for about 15 years now. So whether that's in school systems, mental health clinics, nonprofits, I've worked with children from ages 5 to 95, and have recently started something called Resiliency Rising, an organization that is primarily focused on spreading resiliency skills in businesses, organizations, schools, families, whoever. And so that's really what I'm spending most of my time doing, mainly because when I came across this model, I found something that worked faster for individuals and myself than I had ever seen anything really work. As a clinician, I had seen people continuing to come to me for regulation. And I noticed that people can regulate and start relying on themselves. It doesn't mean that I think that it's a replacement for clinical interventions, but what I do believe is that when we start sharing a common language around the impacts of stress and trauma and the biological nature of it, we can start to support one another rather than just relying on clinical interventions, which oftentimes aren't there during large crises, huge pandemics, right, where people are needing a lot more support. And so I believe in this model to be able to kind of change that paradigm where we continue destigmatizing mental health because it's just what's going on with all of us. I've been working with the mothership organization called the Trauma Resource Institute. The creator of this model is Elaine Miller-Karras. Want to give her all the credit that she deserves for creating something that's so accessible, affordable, and available. And so just want to make sure that I give her a shout out. So whenever we start any sort of workshops, and let me just give you the lay of the land really quick tonight. There will be the beginning of the presentation. We'll be giving the most basic nuts and bolts of the model and the why to it, understanding why it's a biological model. And then we'll get into, hopefully we'll cover 4 of the skills. We call them the basic 3 and help now. We'll move through them as quickly as we can. We'll end where we end. The model is flexible and adaptable, and so are we. So I'd just like to take a moment to start out. We start out pretty much anytime we meet together, anytime we do any sort of training, we start out with what are resiliency pauses or resiliency questions. So if you just take a minute and think about these aren't necessarily 3 separate questions, but they're just questions to think about in general. What or who is helping you the most right now? What or who is giving you strength? And what or who has helped you get through hard times in the past? And I'll just invite you to write your answers in the chat. Sometimes it can be helpful to see, again, the commonality of our human experience. I'll tell you, in this moment, I'm nervous, right? I can feel like a little bit of heart rate increasing, and I have like my really good friend T right here, right? And I'm noticing every time I take a drink that it helps me get through. It like reminds me to like calm for a moment. Dogs and family. Yep, Beth, I got my little furry family in here too, which is awesome. My parents, family and friends. I have great coworkers. Awesome, Shannon. Dogs, friends, kids, family, partner, parents, pets. Hi, Lindsay. My brother, my daughter gives me strength, friends and family. Learning self-regulation tools have been miraculous. Yes, amen. Amen. 2 close friends, husband, faith, yes. Friends and dog, friends, dogs, hiking, new friends. Yes, wraparound coordinator. Awesome. That is great to hear. Skiing, getting outdoors, yoga, friends, neighbors. Great. So we can see just in this moment that a lot of us rely on kind of those, I would say, oftentimes simple things in life that really help us get through those connections we have with one another, furry animals, our natural environments. We all live in a beautiful state that allows us to access those things if that's a resource for us. So with that, we call these resiliency pauses. And I just want you to take note of how different you might, we all might be collectively experiencing this moment. Had I said, tell me the most difficult part of your last year. Tell me what's been the most challenging thing you've gone through this week, right? All of a sudden it kind of shifts. Now, with that said, we are not ignoring the collective human suffering that is part of life, right? We're not ignoring any of those things. We're also just calling to mind what else is true. Okay, so what else is true in the same moment? So during those difficult times, during just a regular day, it's so important to remember what else is true and its impact on our nervous system. So again, just just invite you to pause and recall those things that you wrote down, or if you didn't write them down, those things that you kind of brainstormed with yourself. So before I go on to the next slide, it can be helpful for us to define what resiliency is. So I want to take just a second and have you jot down in the chat, what does the word resilient mean to you? Kind of what is that definition? I feel like it's thrown around all the time, right? We're resilient, go to resiliency trainings, our kids are resilient, right? But what does that word actually mean to you? Being the best I can be no matter what circumstances appear in life, bouncing back, yeah. Ability to use a set of skills to get through good and bad times. Nice, right? It's not just inherent, right? We often have to be skillful, bouncing back, knocked down, but getting back up. Mental and physical toughness, bouncing back, ability to overcome hard times. Yep. keep it on, keep it on. Just keep swimming, right, Dora? Or Dory, the ability to endure and bounce back, getting through difficulty, bending versus breaking, and if breaking, rising up. Love these. Yes. So I don't know about you, but whenever I do this, I love it because it reminds me of what my focus is, right? And I don't know about you, but I could use a little bit of more of all of these things in my life, right? In different situations, environments, etc. So through Try, our organization, and Elaine, oops, there we go. She has defined resiliency as an individual and community's ability to identify and use individual and collective strengths in living fully with compassion in the present moment, and to thrive while managing the activities of daily living. So again, like some of you said, it isn't this idle thing, right? I don't wake up one morning and I'm like, oh my gosh, there it is. I'm like resilient now, right? No, it's an ongoing process. It's active. Some days I'm better at it. Some days I'm not, for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about. And when we talk about like, what does it mean by thriving during activities of daily living? So like I said, resiliency isn't just about like, I have a gratitude journal and every morning I write down all the things that are going well, right? No, it's more complex than that, because I do want to acknowledge that there is suffering in the world, right? If I don't acknowledge that, then I am pushing things aside, right? Then I'm pretending things aren't there. So I can acknowledge it. And at the same time, I can show up compassionately to other people, right? I can still be empathetic, but I can also be solution focused, right? I can also be optimistic. I can continue to cultivate well-being. I can also know that individually and collectively, there are strengths and there are limitations, right? So when we talk about that, that's just a little bit more in depth as to what that means. So if I only had 2 slides to show you, this would be one of the 2. And I think it's really important in the way that we look at this model and the way that we look at humans in general. So in general, there's been a movement over the past, let's say, I want to say like 30 years, where, but I do want to say that conventional is very alive and well. And it's very alive and well in me when I'm not at my best self. And conventional means that we look at people and we say, people are bad, people need to be punished, right? People don't care. They're doing this to manipulate me. We need to stop making excuses for people, right? What's wrong with you? And we hear those words like, what's wrong with that person, right? So we now have taken conventional and we've realized that that we need to know people's stories, right? That having a context for a human life often then allows us to be more empathetic and compassionate. Okay, so that's where trauma-informed is born. And trauma-informed is incredibly important, but I don't believe that the buck stops there. And what I mean is we do know people suffer. We do know, let's say ACEs, for instance, right? We do know that adverse childhood experiences impact health, right? It's important for us to know these things. It's important for us to understand in our classrooms, in our agencies, potentially what someone has been through. But what I'd like to also suggest is that, do I have to know someone's story in order to be compassionate? Or can I just start to move to this place of humans deserve compassion, right? Just because they're human. Or can I decide that, I was doing a workshop, I've done a workshop at, with alternative high school settings and domestic violence shelters. And one of the things that I've found when working with different populations like this is that they are tired of telling their story, and they're tired of being identified always with that story. And I don't know about you, but like, I don't really want to tell you all my like story that defines me in this really hard way. I want to tell you about my story of growth. I want to tell you where I am now after the challenges I've been through. So resiliency informed moves us from this place of what happened to you, right? Potentially keeping people in boxes. I'm not saying that we don't need to do interventions and things like that. But when we move into resiliency informed, we know that people are resilient. That doesn't mean that we don't provide services. That doesn't mean that we don't teach skills. That doesn't mean we don't keep working towards social justice and advocacy endeavors. But what it does mean is that we believe in the inherent capacity of humans, right? We believe that when we teach people skills, it can reduce the negative impacts of ACE on central nervous systems, right? And so we start to look at what is right with you and what are your strengths and how can we push that forward. And I believe that they can go hand in hand. I don't believe trauma-informed and resiliency-informed are mutually exclusive from each other. I believe they complement each other really well. Also, feel free to throw anything in the chat if there's questions or whatnot. Beth will help me with that. Okay, we're getting there. So the community resiliency model, what is it? It's a set of 6 wellness skills designed to reset the central nervous system, which we'll get into and you'll know what that means. So we believe that because every human has a nervous system, that this can be used across the lifespan. It can be used with different cultures, with different literacy abilities. You don't need to know how to read or write in order to learn this model. And again, I want to say culturally, right? I have my lens and my perspective as a middle-aged white woman who grew up in Idaho and has only lived in Montana, Alaska, Utah. My frame of reference is very different, right? It's what I'm bringing to the table. And just want to say, invite you all to be my teachers. If there's anything that is that I could work on tonight to be more inclusive, I really invite you to share that feedback with me. But, and because we all have access to the language of our bodies, it can help us understand the human experience, and it generalizes across all of these different settings. So the community resiliency model can help us create safer spaces for dialogue regarding our differences, honoring our lived experiences, and remembering what binds us as a world community. And that's because we are at our essence, nervous systems walking around reacting with one another. I made this phone call this week because I was really nervous about a support group that I was running this week. And one of the women from Tri said, Laurie, just remember, they're all nervous systems. And I was like, thank you, perfect, right? So we'll get into more of what that means, but it really helps us just remember that at the very basic level, we're all just humans trying to figure it out. I want to call your attention to this before we kind of jump into some more of the model. This is the iChill app. If after tonight you're curious about learning about the other skills that I don't mention, Elaine Miller-Karras, the creator of the model, she walks you through it. You'll see that button in the middle says skills. You can push on it and she'll actually lead you through the skills, which is really nice because you'll get to hear the language again. Practice it if you'd like to. You can also share it with anyone else during crisis. It can be a great tool to use. It's free. Okay, take a drink really quick. So that's an overview kind of the community resiliency model, and now we're going to get into it. So now I'll talk to you about the resiliency zone. Common reactions we all have to stress and trauma. And then we'll just give a really basic definition of stress and trauma so we all are coming from the same place. And then we'll be jumping into the skills. So the resiliency zone or resilient zone is kind of the fundamental piece of the model. And I think of it as a cake pan, right? So when you make a cake and you have a cake pan, nobody really pays attention to the cake pan. You don't like take a cake to someone for their birthday and they're never like, gosh, that's such a neat cake pan, right? Unless it's like, I don't know, in the shape of a tiger or something, but it's usually just like there, right? But if you don't have a cake pan, you don't have a cake, and it would just like go all over in your oven, right? So when we think about the model in this way, I want you to think about it as like the cake pan. It can be a complement to anything and everything that you're already doing. It doesn't need to be standalone. You don't need to create a whole different system. It can really be incorporated. So the resilient zone, though, is when I explain it, I say the resiliency zone is a place where I can be happy, sad, mad, scared, frustrated, annoyed, but I can handle it. I'm not going to harm myself or others with word, actions, or deeds. So I'm not going to get so angry that I'm going to say something to someone that then I need to maybe apologize for later. I do still. Or bump so low that I feel like I'm washed away in the rivers of sorrow. So when I'm in my zone, I can be okay mad. I can be okay sad, right? I can still feel all the feels, but I'm not going to have them be so overwhelming that they feel unmanageable. So our goal with this model, we're going to still bump out. It's going to happen. It happens to me all the time still, right? But the goal is that we increase our ability to widen that zone or to get back in the zone when we're out, or stay in the zone longer because we know when we're starting to bump out by reading our nervous system. So again, things happen in our life, right? As we go through the day, there's just ups and downs constantly, like one moment to the next, right? It's constantly evolving, it's constantly flowing. And so this just helps to show little people sometimes that within this place, it's not like everything is fine. It's not like the good place to be. It's not where I'm happy, right? It's where I can manage, where I feel like I can manage all the ups and downs. Okay. So remember how I told you about the animal thing? I need to let my dog out really quick. Come on. Okay, thank you. Okay, so dun, dun, dun. Sometimes life happens, right? So sometimes there are those events. Sometimes they're big traumatic events. Sometimes they're like your dog wanting to go out in the middle of the presentation, right? That happen, that start to push us out of this zone or bump us out of it. Okay, so these can be reminders or they can be happening in real time as well. So when we bump into that high zone, we may be, now these words that are up here, remember, you can be okay edgy, right? But these are like big things. These are like big, edgy, irritable, anxiousness or panic, mania. They can be big outbursts. Or we can, again, get washed away in those rivers of sorrow, right? So I say there's a difference between okay, sad and depression, right? Or wanting to be alone and isolating yourself. Sometimes I talk to students and we call it the overwhelming sense of blah, like there's just not a whole lot. And this happens. One of my favorite things to do is to bump out high, and I'll say something that isn't very nice or in an aggressive way. And then I feel so shameful about it that I bump low and I just like want to go to my bedroom for the rest of the night. Right? So we can also go between the two. How fun, right? So if you look through this, you might just take notice of what is your kind of go-to, right? Are you a bump higher or are you a bump lower? Maybe you stay in your zone most of the time, but when you come out, man, this is where you're going, right? So it's just good to kind of know what our natural tendency can be sometimes. And I do want to say that just because I'm saying that it's a natural human experience to bump high or low does not mean that it's okay to harm people. It doesn't mean it's okay to be verbally abusive. It doesn't mean it's okay to be physically harmful to anyone. That's when maybe it's a reaction for you, and it also requires intervention and help. Okay, so resilient zones, right? Narrow and wide. We probably all know people that seem to be cool as a cucumber on the outside just all the time. Don't they drive you crazy? How does that even happen, right? Just kidding. I'm sure you're on the call too. I appreciate you. That just have these really wide zones, right? Or there's people that just kind of, you're like, whoa, it kind of feels like they're always on edge. You're kind of like scared, maybe dancing around a little bit. Their nervous systems might just have a little bit shallower of a resilient zone. This can also be day to day, right? When I decide to go to bed on time, do my whole rigmarole thing I do in the morning to make sure I have a good day, my resilient zone is massive, hard to bump me out. When I don't do those things, my zone is smaller and it's quite a bit easier to get bumped out. It also could be people. You can all of a sudden just see that person that all of a sudden you have a smaller resiliency zone with, right? So it's constantly fluctuating. So there's the resiliency zone. So again, our goal really is to expand that resiliency zone so that we can stay in it longer. We can build our capacity to come back in quicker. So common reactions here. Really quick, as I've been talking about this and I say common reactions, give me some of the common reactions you think about when people potentially bump out high or bump out low. This could be something you see in your kids or your partner or friends or on television, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be with yourself, or it can be, right? What are some of those behaviors that we might see? Yelling to be heard. Yep. Crying. Yep. Silence. Ooh, yeah. A really good stonewall. That's a good one. Isolating. Saying things in a clipped voice. Yes. Yep. I have never done that. Binge shopping. Yes. I become the target rather than the issue. Okay. So getting smaller, maybe turning to drugs and alcohol. Exactly. Drinking, threats, right? Yes. Great. So when I show this slide, I say, pick your favorite. Which one is your favorite up here, right? We all have ones that we go to, that we gravitate to more than others for a variety of reasons. And oftentimes it's because what it feels like works in the moment for us, right? It probably doesn't work long-term for us, but it's become a pattern. I often see, when I was working in schools, we see a lot of upset stomachs or headaches, right? Those things, and wonder like, gosh, this kid has a stomach ache every single day. What is going on, right? Well, our nervous system gets really activated. When our nervous systems get really activated, it can lead to digestion issues, right? So take a look there, manifests in lots of different ways. As we're going through our really strange times right now, I don't even know what to call them anymore, like this weird thing we're doing, whether it's COVID, I don't know, political and social unrest, I don't know. We have had common reactions here too, right? We have this stigmatization against people. We're really polarized. We're noticing grave inequities, not noticing, we're starting to really bring them to light. We don't know what the heck is happening day to day. Things change. We're seeing these chronic health issues, massive disruption of our social networks. So we have all had common reactions here, right? And for some reason, it seems like we're not remembering that common humanity and those common reactions anymore. So it can be helpful again to come back to this place of, even though we might believe different things, at the essence, we have these nervous systems and these common reactions that we all kind of go to when we're bumping out of our zones. However, okay, there's this really cool research study done, and I can't remember his name. If you want it, write to me and I'll get it to you. I think it's like Bonobo is his last name or something like that. But he did the study on what is the most common reaction after stress or trauma. And he found people commented more on resiliency reactions to stress or trauma than anything else, right? So I just want you to take a moment to think about something you've been through, not massive, please. I want you to be able to stay engaged in the call, but something you've been through that has been challenging. And when you think about that challenge, how have you come back on the other side? Like when I think about some of my biggest challenges, I think I have a greater ability to trust myself to make good decisions, right? So I invite you to just take a moment here too, and maybe write some of those common reactions that are resiliency reactions. It can be your own or things you've seen in other people. Oh, thanks, Ellie. Yeah, awesome. Bonano, close. I think a bonobo is a monkey. but reaching out for help. Yeah. Commitment to be the best patient I can be so that doctors and nurses have an opportunity to be at their best. Oh, thank you. Going to the movies. Okay, that could be a common reaction after something has happened. Yeah. Librarian mojo, you're welcome. That's so awesome. Appreciation for those that helped. Yeah, like a greater appreciation for people. And you can see some other ones up there: strength and courage, renewed relationships, compassion for self and others, grateful for getting through. Yeah, exactly. Greater resilience in the future, for sure. Being able to call on past experiences to be able to get through future ones. Great. Deeper relationships, quitting drinking and trusting myself. Nice. Excellent. Congrats. So let's just move into this last little bit of content, and then we will jump into the skills. Okay. So definitions of stress and trauma, I just want to make it clear that not all stress is bad, right? I need a little bit of stress in my life to get up in the morning, right? I need a little bit of stress in my life to make sure that dinner gets put on the table, etc. So there is also positive stress when I'm excited for a trip, right? As long as it's planned and doesn't interfere too much with work, right? It can be positive stress, right? It's me responding to something mild or moderate. I might have a little bit of an increase in my heart rate or my temperature because I'm like getting things done and moving, but my balance is going to return fairly quickly because I'm just kind of dealing with a normal day-to-day stressor. Then I kind of move into tolerable stress. It often is time limited. I may need to use a skill. I may need to get through it skillfully, right? But my body again is going to return back to its homeostasis place. And then we move into toxic stress. Toxic stress is where we're living in environments that are unstable. Potentially we don't have enough or we have too little. We experience this something called allostasis, which is essentially just getting flooded by stress hormones that then start to actually change the makeup of our brains and how we are able to respond. It either can make us over respond or under respond to actual threats. The one thing I want to highlight is this little green box down here, where it says stressful or traumatic experiences are experienced upon a child's or adult's perception. So this idea of why can't they just get over it, right? When someone has experienced something that you don't find to be very challenging, right? It doesn't matter, because all it matters is how our nervous systems and how we have perceived it. So when we think of like the DSM-5, sometimes it just doesn't work for me, because just because it wasn't life-threatening to someone, right, doesn't mean that they're not experiencing the same amount of trauma responses as someone who experienced something life-threatening. We can also think about it this way, in these kind of three categories: too much, too fast. This could be a large-scale trauma; too little for too long, experiences of neglect; or too much for too long, potentially like a global pandemic, right? Or domestic violence in a household. I'm going to take a resiliency pause here for just a moment, just inviting you to recall the things from the beginning that you said brought you hope or peace or joy, what helps you get through hard times. And just I invite you to recall those for a moment. All right. So why a biological intervention? So this is, again, that base piece of why the central nervous system. So our focus in this model is about biology and not human weakness, right? We all have these common reactions. We all have nervous systems that are constantly responding to our environments. So we being the model helps individuals learn to read their nervous system to return to their zone of well-being called the Resilient Zone through the use of simple wellness skills. I'm going to move through this section just a little bit more quickly, just for time's sake, okay? So again, the natural rhythms of nature exist within the human nervous system. It's a reminder that we don't have to be trapped with the distressing sensations, right? It kind of reminds me of like winter. No one is like looking outside tonight being like, oh no, the poor grass, what is the grass gonna do? Like, we just trust that this is a natural cycle, right? With skills, we can trust that there's also a natural cycle to our nervous system. It ebbs and flows, it gets all jacked up, and then we can teach it to return back to the resilient zone. Neuroplasticity, we are through this whole model. And again, when we do longer workshops, we get so much more into this. And to me, it is like the most fascinating part is the brain science behind it. It's like, why does this work? Right? So as we start to notice our sensations of well-being, we're creating new neural pathways for well-being. Our brains are primed to pay attention to the things that aren't working. It has a strong negativity bias, evolutionarily so, and we are working to also bring into light what else is true for it. So just in the very end here, I'm going to give like such a massive oversimplification of the autonomic nervous system. What it means is when I watch a scary movie, right? My brain actually doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. And so that's why my body responds to it, right? So watching a scary movie, I don't do it, but when I have done it, it makes my sympathetic nervous system or my gas pedal go on, right? My breathing rate goes up. I start sweating. My muscles are tense. I feel like the girl getting chased in the movies, right? All those things are happening to me, right? And then, oh my gosh, when she makes it in the room, right? Oh, then I'm like, okay, she's in the room. Phew, right? My brain's like, woo, we made it in the room, because it doesn't know that I'm not the girl in the movie. My parasympathetic nervous system can come back online. That's my brake pedal, right? I can take a deep breath. My heart rate hopefully slows down because I made it and I'm safe. And the cops came and took the guy away on the movie, right? I'm like, whoo, made it. Our nervous systems are constantly doing this. It does it when we go for hikes, bike rides. We want it to work. It does it when a child is stepping out into the road and we go to block them. We don't have to think about it. Our central nervous system responds to do all these wonderful, magical things for us. So it's not a bad thing. It's just a nice thing to understand. When we are tracking, which we're going to go into right now, this is kind of what we're paying attention to. We're paying attention to the natural ebbs and flows of our nervous system. Skills. Here we go. I just want to pause here though and say, are there any burning questions, thoughts, comments, etc., before we jump into the skill portion? That's really fast. Okay. They say I'm supposed to give 7 seconds when I ask a question to when I begin. I think I did 7. You never quite know, silence on Zoom is so terrifying. Okay, ready? Skills. So you can see in the center is tracking. And when we talk about the basic 3, they are tracking, which is the foundation of all the skills. You can do tracking alone, but you can't do any of the other skills without tracking. Okay, so it's tracking and resourcing, tracking and grounding, and tracking and help now. And those are the 4 that we're going to try to get through tonight if we can. Skill 1, tracking. It's like the mothership of all the skills. Okay, tracking is reading our sensations. It's the foundation for stabilizing our nervous system. When we notice or pay attention to our sensations and what's happening on the inside in the present moment. So you do it all day long. When you feel your stomach growl, that is you tracking that you're hungry, and you usually go find something to eat. When you are hot and you take your jacket off, that's you tracking your internal temperature that needs to be cooled down, right? So we're constantly doing these things all the time. When you have a little sore back and you need to stand up and stretch, that's you tracking. there's doorways of expanding and understanding our well-being. We have become so cognitive, right? Why do I feel the way that I feel? How can I like nitty gritty just like get into all the details? Sometimes it's super helpful to understand, right? Our thoughts, our thinking, yes, for sure, right? But it's only one doorway, okay? There's another doorway that is our feeling world, right? Expanding that language. What are all the different feelings or emotions that I can feel? And another doorway is sensations. And sensations are below our cognitive level of understanding. They happened before we ever had this ability, this frontal lobe, to even think. So before anything happens like thinking or feeling, we have a sensation in our body that appears, right? But we've gotten really separated from the body and mind connection. So we're just trying to bring that back in to help us regulate. So what we pay attention to grows, right? And again, I really, really want to emphasize that I am not talking about positive thinking. Positive thinking can totally help. I'm thinking about what sensations in our body can we pay attention to help ourselves grow. Oh, there's my aunt and uncle. I love you. I'm so happy to see you. Oh, I'm tracking right now. My heart is so warm. I have some tears behind my eyes because I just haven't seen them. I'm just feeling so grateful. Oh, so what we pay attention to grows. I just want to give an example. This morning, how many of you woke up and you woke up and you were like, oh, did your little stretch thing, whatever you do. And you were like, man, my elbows, they feel so good right now. Like, I can't even believe how good my elbows are feeling this morning, right? Like nobody did that. Everybody was all like, oh my gosh, like my back, or like, oh, I got that knee thing, right? I did too, just saying. But the brain like doesn't want to explore these other places because it really wants to find out what's wrong and fix it for all great reasons. Love you. Thank you for doing that. But it's not helpful. It is not helpful. So what we're trying to do is just bring in what else is true alongside that other stuff, right? Alongside my back. What about the thousands of places in my body that are working like really, really well right now, right? We don't often bring those in. So we really are trying to bring in those small little things too. This is just a map that people filled out, different areas where they sense different emotions in their body, just showing that we can have this sensation experience alongside of a feeling emotion or a thinking thought, right? So when we learn to discern the difference, when we learn to tell the difference between sensations of distress and sensations of well-being, we begin to have a choice of what we pay attention to on the inside. Now, that doesn't mean that distress just like magically disappears, right? But I can have a sensation of distress and a sensation of well-being at the same time, and I can hold them both and decide which one I want to pay a little bit more attention to. So I'll often ask these questions. You'll hear me ask them tonight. Is the sensation pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? We're going to go to the sensations that are more pleasant or neutral and sit with those. I always say like neutral, give me neutral any day. Nothing going on, please sign me up. That sounds great. So we're going to move into doing a skill here in a moment. But just know that for some people, when we start on the sensation journey in our bodies, it can sometimes spark unpleasant sensations. And that's totally normal. It can be, again, because the brain has this hard negativity bias and it really wants us to fix things. That's okay. So we always get, everything is a choice here. So if something isn't working right, no worries. You can decide not to do it. It's not a big deal at all. I would love to chat with you about it. So feel free to reach out to me. And again, in any of the longer workshops, we go into a lot more detail about how to kind of work with that. So when we think about sensation words, when we get into this next part, I want you to think about sensation vocabulary, because what you might notice is what I say, what do you notice on the inside? You might say, I feel calm, right? Well, what does calm actually feel like? For me, I know calm feels like an expanse in my chest, right? It feels like a lack of tension in my shoulders. It feels like a regulated heartbeat, right? It feels warm or neutral. Okay. So you can start to think in this language of sensation. Flipping from emotion to sensation takes us from cognitive into the body, right? So if you say, like, I feel relaxed, fine, I say that all the time. Then can you put some sensation words to where in your body you're noticing that relaxation? Okay. So we never jump straight into, hey, track something into your body because of the reason that I just said. Sometimes it doesn't feel good. So we always introduce a second skill called resourcing, which can often be helpful to understand tracking more. So what is resourcing, our second skill? Resourcing is any person, place, thing, memory, experience, hobby, that when you think about it, it brings you a sense of joy, peace, calm, hope, etc. Okay. So again, animals, all of the things that you listed at the beginning can be resources, right? Skiing was a big one, right? Oh my gosh, what an awesome resource to have, to be outside, to be in nature, to feel the wind, all of those things, right? Places that you've visited before. They can also be imagined. Sometimes I work with people who say, like, I don't have anything, right? So if you could imagine something, what would you imagine could be a resource? If someone had a resource, what do you think that might be for someone else, right? So because we're going to get into an activity, and as we do it, I'll ask you, okay, think of something that brings you joy, peace, calm, or hope, right? And then what I'm going to do is ask you to intensify the resource. So this is a part, if you're listening in, I'm going to invite you to grab a piece of paper because you'll want something. It can often be helpful the first time you resource to write it down, because again, the brain really likes to take us on magical adventures and we want to try to focus it. So we do what's called resource intensification. So when I ask you questions or to write about three additional, what's the word I'm looking for? Three additional memories or sensory experiences, describing words, geez Louise, describing it in more details, there it was, describe in more details what your resource is. That's because we want to override the negativity bias that will often jump in and be like, hey, wait a minute, it's not that good. Don't you remember when this happened, right? And so we want to keep the brain on the track of, yeah, that's okay, it happened. It's cool, but can I keep building my resource? And the way I do that is to bring in as much sensory experience to it. So I often think about it as painting a Bob Ross photo, right? For those of us that know Bob Ross, he paints like the happy little trees, right? And starts to put texture and color, right? So that it like starts to grow off the page. And that's what I want you to think about when you are developing your resource. So this is my resource. You've already heard me talk about her, so I'm sure it is. Her name is Lucy, right? So if I were doing this, I'm just going to describe my resource for you, right? So even as I look at this picture, it's like so amazing to me. She's this like little terrier mixed dog, and she has this wiry little hair, and you can see she has like black eye, and she's like black and white and has those sweet little ears. And when I show up at home, I think one of the reasons that she's my resource is she like always really loves me and always thinks I'm really great, even when I don't think I'm really great. And her whole body just kind of like moves and shakes, like her back end shakes so much that it almost like picks her feet up off the ground, right? And even as I'm talking about her, I can see you smiling, right? Hopefully I'm sharing my resource with you, and I feel like my heart rate is calm. I have a big smile on my face. I feel joy in my chest, which joy in my chest just feels like big and expansive, and my shoulders drop, and I take a deep breath. And that's just my nervous system responding to a resource of mine, right? I'm putting myself with my little pup. So what I'm going to invite you to do is I'm going to walk you through resourcing. Now, this first time, if you've never resourced before, I'm going to invite you to not pick a human. And that's because humans are really tricky and very complicated, right? So we're going to try to pick something that's not really complicated. So that's oftentimes an experience, a place outdoors we really love, a dog, an animal, a smell. And when I just want you to pick pick a couple, just write a couple down that come to mind straight away. And then instead of just picking 3 details, if that works for you, that's fine too. But I'd like to invite you to write about it for 1 minute. Okay. And as you write about it, I want you to describe it in as many sensory details as you can. What do you see? What do you hear? Maybe is there a temperature? Are you outside? What do you notice on your skin? Do you smell anything? Are you with anyone? And I'll just give you 1 minute. And as you're writing, I just want you to, I invite you to pay attention to sensations like your heart rate or your breathing, maybe your muscle tension. And as you end here, I invite you to maybe close your eyes for a moment. As you can imagine that resource, you can also just read what you wrote to reinforce it to yourself. Can you see it? And then what are those sensations of well-being that are associated with it? And this is where I would love it if you would write some of those in the chat, right? What is, maybe notice anything from the beginning of the resourcing activity until now. Maybe you were in your zone already, but you noticed maybe a little more depth. Maybe you noticed a deep breath. And just want to smile. Great. Connectedness. So that's just, I invite you to notice where you feel connectedness on the inside, right? Lighter. Increased gratitude. Where do you notice that increased gratitude? My headache has subsided. I'll take it. That sounds awesome. Notice those other places that feel pleasant, that don't have a headache. Calm, peaceful feeling. Where do you notice that calm, peaceful feeling, right? So as we practice this, we notice that desire to go to that cognitive place, right? How do we know we're more calm and peaceful? Do we feel less tension? Do we feel just like a settledness? Warm, present, thanks, like I belong, nice. A relaxation, expansive through chest radiating out, relaxed jaw, that's a big one, yeah. Slower breathing and heart rate, a lightening, yeah. Breathing is slower and deeper. Excellent, so awesome. And I just want to say, if you didn't experience that and you're kind of like, right? That's okay. That's totally fine. Sometimes when we start this process, we just are kind of like, I don't really understand what's going on here. Remind you, this is like an hour, right? And it takes some time to shift what we've always done. That's just part of being a human, right? So, yeah, thank you for trying that out. Hands in prayer position. One of our skills is gesturing, and that's often just a really wonderful gesture that brings calm almost instantly sometimes. So I invite you, like when you're doing that, what often accompanies the hands when they come together, right? Do you notice a relaxation in the chest? What kind of happens for you straight away? It can be great. So again, like that cake pan, right? How can we bring in tracking into the things that we already do in our life? when we go for a walk and we know that we're feeling more relaxed, can we track that? Can we just notice that? Everybody say bye to Lucy. Bye, Lucy. See you later. Okay. So there's these different ways that we can track sensations. We can observe, right? We can observe it in ourselves and others. Nervous systems really love to match up together. It's one of their favorite things to do. They really like to go to the person that's like running the hottest too. So the more that we track and the more that we can stay in our zone, the more that we can actually help model that to other people, especially our children, right? Or even our clients, if we're working with people. It's really important for us to stay regulated. Regulation in relationships, right? Co-regulation is a really huge part of bonding with one another. We can notice, have you ever been with someone and after you leave that with them, you don't feel that great, right? Oftentimes that's matching an internal climate with someone else, right? And we can also, when we work into being a guide, which are the longer workshops that I do, we can start guiding others through these skills and asking them the questions. What do you notice on the inside? Is it pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, etc.? So hopefully some of us experience this nervous system release. That can be yawning. I always love it when I see people, when people come and see me and then they start yawning. I'm always like, yes, nervous system relief. We're getting somewhere, right? They're starting to calm. That cooling down. Sometimes tingling or trembling can happen when we have a big nervous system release. So we just start to pay attention to these in our life. Oftentimes for a lot of us, it's the big sighing, right? We get so offended by sighs, right? Like, why is that person sighing or something? How about like that person's regulating their nervous system? That would be like awesome to start saying, right? Way to sigh. Was that sigh pleasant for you? It sounded really nice. I think I'll do the same, right? Okay. That is tracking and resourcing. Just give us my 7 seconds for any questions about tracking or resourcing before we move on to our third skill. Actually, I want to ask you all another question too, so you can pop something in the chat if you want to, but also, when do you see yourself potentially being able to use this resource you just had? Right? How do you see that fitting into your life? When do you need to just take a pause and be like, whoa, like instead of going to the scary movie scene that's in my head right now, how can I shift into a different resource for me to calm that nervous system, then to be able to engage in the way that I want to engage? So just think about that for a moment. During schooling my son, yeah. When feeling overwhelmed, when I have insomnia, yeah. Go to work in the IT, it's a pain. Totally. Anytime I get on any IT phone call, when I start having painful past memories, yes, exactly. So again, right, we get to shift the stories in our mind, and often those stories in our mind, right, tend to go to the things that haven't worked or haven't gone well. It's like when we go on a walk and we get in an argument with someone on our walk in our head, right, and we're like all mad. It's kind of like shifting that, like, what do we pay attention to, this fake argument we got in, or do we want to like settle our nervous system down a little bit? Basically any stoplight. Yes. Oh my gosh, you guys are so great. I walk around and touch furniture pieces and then name them out loud after stepping away from hard moments at work. That is so awesome, Jerry. And hopefully we're going to get to help now here. And that is like on point right there with some of those like really quick things that we can do when we can't be like, I need to think of something joyful, peaceful, or calm. We're like, I don't have time for that. I'm freaking out in here, right? We can go to some help now skills that can really help us in those moments. Okay, so the skill number 3 is in the basic 3 is called grounding. Grounding is the direct contact of the body or part of the body with something that provides support in the present moment. This is where we're really in the present. We're not worried about the past or the future. Our gravitational support is amazing, right? It's a very constant, consistent thing that we have that we can count on. So we can ground in any way. And I'm sure lots of people have grounded in lots of different ways, using different practices, etc. We are all about choose your own adventure here in the community resiliency model. You can ground however you want to, lying down, swimming, standing against a wall, with your hands on the table. It doesn't matter. Your legs can be crossed or uncrossed. Your head can be down on the table. Welcome all teenagers across the world. So I'm going to lead us through just a short grounding exercise. Again, in longer workshops, we go more in depth as to kind of why this works with the brain and all of that. But I just would like to invite you to try this out. So you can keep your screen on or off, whatever feels most comfortable for you. I'll just invite you to find a comfortable position. So whatever that is, just make any adjustments you'd like. You can keep your eyes open or closed. And I'll just invite you to notice how your body is making contact with your chair, your sofa, the wall, the ground, the earth. Notice your thighs or your legs as they are making contact with that chair or cushion. Notice your feet, if they're making contact with the earth. Your back making contact. And notice the sensations that are more pleasant to you or neutral within the body. If you become aware of any uncomfortable sensations, that's okay. I'll invite you to come on back to those pleasant or neutral sensations, or you can pivot back to your resource. And as we get ready to end, I invite you to slowly scan your body and bring your attention to all the sensations that are pleasant or neutral. And I'll just invite you to come on back. Thank you. I feel even more grounded. That was nice. So I'll just invite you again. Again, what we're trying to do is develop our capacity to know when we're in our zones, right? Because all of us know distress really well. I know what bumping out of my zone feels like, right? But it's harder, or it still is a journey for me, but it was harder to know when I was experiencing well-being. And that's because noticing a sunset or noticing that I'm calm, right, doesn't necessarily keep me alive, right? Noticing distress potentially does. So we're trying to override that negativity bias. So if you can just maybe pop in the chat, I invite you to, it'd be great to just hear some sensations of well-being. Can help other people maybe be like, oh yeah, I noticed that too. Or, I never thought about that. So I notice a settling, right? It feels like I'm more weighted into the earth. Sometimes I feel like I could just like spiral out into the sky. So I just feel like when I ground, I can feel myself a little bit more settled. Feel the weight of gravity, yeah. My back and butt and thighs being supported by cushions. Notice where the pleasant sensations, I'm assuming those bring about pleasant sensations. I didn't realize I'd been having back pain from hunching over my computer all day until I sat back against my chair, right? So that awareness, yeah, nice. So notice that it was probably really pleasant when you sat back. Beth, thanks. Soft breathing coming out of my nose, nice, yeah, excellent. Okay, so I'm just going to show this next slide briefly because we're bumping up against time here. So this help now and reset now, as you saw maybe on that app, when you go into skills, it's not there. It's because it's on that very front page, because sometimes we are bumped out where cognitive thought is totally offline. It's not available to us. And we're operating solely from our survival brain, from that fight flight place. And we need something to help us remember that we're not running away from a tiger that feels like it jumped into our room, right? That there is no tiger in there. We're just having a natural common reaction to something. So oftentimes I loved that example of touching something, right? So we often say, touch a surface, right? I'll often put my hands on a desk in a meeting, right? Just to remind myself that I'm in the meeting and that my at the time, my boss isn't actually the tiger, right? I have to stay present in order to do my job. Or taking a sip, right? I talked about earlier, taking a drink actually puts on that parasympathetic nervous system, that brake pedal can help bring me back, right? Feeling the temperature in the room, walking, but noticing that I'm walking, right? Not getting into that pretend fight in my head that jacks my nervous system up. Counting backwards. One of my most favorites that I do a lot is noticing the colors in my room. So I'll point out all the yellow things, right? Orienting myself, I'll point out all the red things, right? Bringing myself back to here and now so that then I can get some cognitive capacity. So maybe just looking at those. We often say that it's really important to practice these when you're not in distress, because then when you're in distress, you'll be able to pick one, because nobody in distress is like, remember that webinar on February 3rd? Oh, I should choose a help now strategy to get through this, right? Said no one ever. So if we can look at these skills and try practicing them throughout our day when we're calmer, they're easier to recall. Okay. So this is where I'm going to stop on this slide. I have quite a few additional slides. Actually, I'll show this one. So tracking again in the middle, we learned resourcing, grounding, and help now. We have 2 more skills, gesturing and shift and stay. I touched on gesturing just a little bit, but those are the 6 skills of the model. This is kind of a way that we can see how potentially we might be having those experiences of being in that higher low zone when we're starting to move through that resilient zone. This is also through some research that has been done as well. I have a lot of research slides. If you would like to see them, I'd be happy to share them with you. I'm sure you're all very upset that I didn't get to all the research. I bet there are some of you, like my aunt, I bet she would like to see that. But do you want to learn more? So again, an hour can be awesome. There's been research done that people have come to an hour workshop, followed up 6 months later and showed that they have an increase of well-being just from being able to implement some of those. If you're like, this is great, this is all I need, awesome, high five, so happy that you're here tonight. If you want more, great. We do teach workshops that are an hour to 2 days. And IRP, the Idaho Resiliency Project, and NAMI are supporting some 2-day guide trainings, which is incredible. They're like my most favorite thing to do. I love spending 2 days with people talking about this, teaching the skills and getting them ready and building this capacity so that we have people that are guiding and learning how to read their nervous system. So when they walk out in the door in the morning, they know how they're bouncing off of other people, right? And we can create this community of resilient humans, right? Which doesn't mean you don't bump out of your zone. It just means you know when you're bumping out of your zone and how to get back in. So Beth is going to drop a link into the chat. That link will allow you to go to see where all of these workshops are going to be, the dates of them. You can sign up there. For 2 full days, it's a screaming deal at $275. That includes materials, the workshop with up to 4 facilitators, lunch. So we're really lucky to be able to have these. If money is an issue, there may be some partial scholarships available, so just invite you to do that. Respectful of time, I know it's 7:17. Please know that I'll see you later if you're done for your night. I totally get it. Here to answer questions or anything else that could be helpful this evening. But just want to say thank you. Really appreciate you all being here and Zooming at 6 o'clock at night. Thank you. And hope I see you somewhere out in the world. And if not, enjoy some of those skills. Bye. Thank you for your smiles. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Laurie, I wanted to ask you a question while I still have you here.
Yeah.
I have a couple of teenagers at home, and there was a time uh, last summer I ran into a young man and his friends, and they were the young boy, not young boy, but teenager, was lying on the pavement
Mhm.
on his side, and his friends were sitting there with him and kind of stroking his hair, and he was having, and I said, is he okay? Should I call someone? And they said, It's fine. He's having a panic attack."
Mhm.
Um, I mean, if you were with someone, I think as an adult who doesn't know this person, I probably wouldn't have said, "Hey, let's try some skills," you know. Um, but as someone, if you were with someone as a friend who was having something like that happen, what's the first thing you would say?
The first thing I would probably say is point someone away from their breath, right? Panic attacks, a lot of people are like, breathe, like take a deep breath, or it's okay, right? And again, this is really hard for a 1 hour and 15-minute workshop to try to answer a question about a panic attack. So I want to be really careful with that. I can answer it in the way that I have no idea who this person is. I don't know anything about them at all. So again, I would do a handful of different things. I might invite that person to notice the temperature of the pavement on the ground. I've had an incident where I've grabbed onto someone's shoes, right? Diverted their attention. Can you notice your feet? Yeah. Can you notice that my hands are squeezing your feet? Yeah. Again, I worry about going in depth into a question like this on an hour workshop when these skills are really just designed for you to take and use for yourself, not for you to be
Yeah.
using with other people. The 2-day allows you to go and start working with them with other people, but I might just try to divert in that moment. I guess would be my best answer for an hour workshop.
And I do have someone asking about a recording,
Yeah.
and seeing that some people tuned in on the Pacific time zone. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Lori. I just like it. That's just one of these
Yeah.
things that just has haunted me. Like, what could
Yeah.
I have done for this young man, and just somebody who cares about
Of course.
teenagers and having witnessed some of those panic attacks from young people.
Mhm. I invite you to come to the 2-day workshop, Beth, and you would have mounds more skills and words around how to kind of work with that better. Yeah, that's what I can say, because I don't want people to leave here starting to just like roll out in the world and being like, look at the colors, why isn't it working? Right. So I think that's probably where I'm gonna stop ethically speaking.
Right.
But
So
yeah,
the app someone asked is called iChill.
yep,
Would this workshop help to care for youth in crisis groups?
for
That is one
sure.
question. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times too, what we do is find out who's attending the groups, the demographic of people, and then we're able to cater a little bit more. So like I said, it's adaptable and flexible, right? So we want to know, when I go into a school versus when I go into a business, they look very different, right? So we can tweak and cater to the people that are showing up.
I did want to stress that this was not meant to be some sort of salesy thing.
No,
The
no, no,
opportunity
no, 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 no. I know.
will come up
No,
later.
I moved to a
Um,
different, yeah, it's all good.
yeah.
So
But if anyone is interested in joining us,
yes,
don't let cost be a factor. Reach out to me, and we'll figure some way out for you.
yeah,
Um,
okay. Well, if there's no further ado, again, feel free to hop off and
Thanks, Laura. You're looking
Yeah,
good.
thanks, Laurie.
thank you.
I appreciate it.